Let's go now to Tony's program, AEW from last Wednesday night, before we talk about the SmackDowners and things and such of that nature. Because, and actually, I remembered Vikingo, but it was the discount Vikingo,
Kommander,
that was on this program. Because basically they do the same shit, and they both wear a mask and mostly a full bodysuit. So, what the the confusion could be easily understood.
They're very different. Vikingo does a lot of spectacular things. Kommander's thing specifically is the running of the ropes, which it doesn't matter when or how far away someone is, he's going to do it, no matter how long they have to wait for him.
Well, and they're going to be there when he fucking lands. I'll tell you that too. No, here was the thing. The AEW Wednesday night, July 12th, starts out with Chris Jericho versus Kommander with Alex in his corner. And the story is not the match. We'll talk about a few things in it.
Oh, it was great.
But
it was the best Jericho match I've seen in forever.
Why would you book this? Why, if you were Tony Khan, why would you book this? If you're Chris Jericho, why did he not tell him not to book this? And I believe I have the answer. But here's the setup. Here's what people saw tuning into this program. If they're tuning into AEW wrestling on a Wednesday night, they see Chris Jericho, former WWF champion, major name in the business. He comes out playing his song. He's a name. The fans are singing the song. He's the heel, but they're cheering the shit out of him because he's Canadian and they're still in Canada. My God, somebody needs to send these people a fucking care package, or maybe we can do a hostage trade. They're still in Canada. But Jericho's Canadian. He's over in this fucking crowd. And then I can see where if people were watching television, they think, okay, here's Chris Jericho. I know him. Here's a wrestling program. The people are cheering for him. Let's see what's going on. And then here comes a pipsqueak in a mask, wearing a blanket, with an obnoxious heel manager that we don't really know who the fuck he is, and he doesn't speak anymore. And the entrance is so underwhelming that even the people in the arena are staring blankly. And they try to make up for the fact that nobody knows who the fuck this guy is by reminding us via B-roll in the entrance that this is the guy that does the synchronized diving with no swimming pool. Because that's what they just show him doing that. And I wrote, why would you book this? Style clash. Even if you think Jericho is still tearing it up in the ring, his work is still great for whatever reason. Kommander does his shit with other small guys who can fly, and Jericho can't do that. And Jericho is old enough now that he needs to work American style and smart or logically, and there's no way in fucking hot hell that Kommander can do that. So the only thing that I had to summarize this was that Jericho wanted to work with and beat another of the guys that the Indie Mud Show fans are loving and digging on this month. And he was really willing to risk this fucking guy landing on his face, which he almost did, to do that. Because there's no other, this couldn't have possibly been a good match, and it meant nothing for Jericho to beat this guy, except to Jericho.
Well, Jericho's lucky. You said he had to worry about the guy landing on his face. Typically, the guy just lands right next to Jericho, it seems like.
Well, that was the way it ended up in this one. But anyway, and this guy can do amazing flips and handstands and gymnastics. And maybe he should pursue Cirque du Soleil. Maybe Kenny's got an in there. He seems to be a regular patron. But when Kommander actually does a move, well, he didn't do any particular wrestling moves, but when he does any move to somebody, it either misses, it barely connects, or it looks like a herky-jerky tater. His strikes are rotten. The basics are non-existent. You can't even tell, the other guy has to stand there and watch him take 30 seconds to get wherever he's going and come off, or sees him coming from a mile away. And here's the thing. This is not Rey Mysterio. There's no split-second timing. There's no physical charisma. There's no fire and energy that you can see of facial expression even through the mask. There's no the specialness of Ray. There is this tiny guy in a mask doing gymnastic moves to a guy in a wrestling ring. And Jericho would let him do some shit and then cut him off and slow it down. And then Kommander would open up 100 miles an hour again to do something, and Jericho would shut it off. But as it went on so long, Jericho's flipping the crowd, double birds constantly. Did that make the list? They didn't even say anything about language or vulgarity.
Not yet.
At one point, Jericho took a bump off the ropes and landed, and then obviously scooted into position and waited motionless with his arms out, laying there for 10 seconds while the Kommander did a tightrope walk, backflip, splash off onto him. And then he did the deal where he walked the top rope from corner to corner, jumped off the other top rope, flipped and spun in the air, and Jericho waited with his arms outstretched on the floor to catch him, and Kommander went right past him, and Jericho went down anyway. And but the biggest one, and this was on Twitter, Jericho's laying there in the ring, again, flat of his back. Kommander turns his back on Jericho, jumps to the top rope, springs boards off, and turns around into a flipping 1.5 revolution cannonball. And apparently Jericho saw as the guy was coming fast and out of control, this is going south, and you see him start to put his arms up like, oh, fuck. And Kommander, instead of splashing Jericho, which apparently was going to be the move, he undershot his rotation and just landed on his feet and ass right next to Jericho, slapping Jericho on the stomach with his right hand in the process. And then covered him and got a 2 count.
It was worth it.
He fell on his ass right next to the motherfucker, barely touched him, and Jericho still lets him cover him? Was he just wanting it to be over with quickly at that point? So anyway, Jericho got him with the walls of Jericho. 13 minutes, bell to bell. Somebody do the research. Did Chris Jericho, at one point in his career, win the WWF title quicker than he just beat Kommander fucking Farquhar here?
I loved this match. I put on Twitter that it was my favorite Jericho match in a long time. People couldn't tell if I was being funny or being serious. Both. I'll be honest, I think Jericho looked good in this. Kommander looked awful.
Well, was it the grading on a curve? Was it, yes, Jericho was laying the chops in. He was controlling as best he could the fucking tempo, but did he just look good because the other guy was just shit?
I think it was, you're right that Jericho shouldn't be working the style that he does at his age and his physical abilities that he has right now. But he certainly shouldn't be working this match with this guy. And that's why I was looking forward to this match when they announced it, because I couldn't even imagine, like, how the hell are they going to do this? And I almost felt for Jericho, because there were a few times you saw him standing there just looking, waiting for this guy to run. And like Vikingo, it's one thing, because whether it's holding onto your wrist and doing the jumping on the ropes or just doing incredible flips onto a downed opponent, that's one thing. When you have to, every single time, we've seen it now multiple times, catch your breath, make sure you don't fall, get your balance. The other guy's standing there either waiting or laying on the ground and looking up, waiting for it to happen. And then the guy weighs 130 pounds, so it doesn't look that great. It wasn't worth it. He missed everything. Every time he jumped from the ring to the floor, he landed next to Jericho. And he's a little guy. I mean, that's the kind of guy you think Jericho can actually catch and do something with. No, every time. Jericho looked fine in this, I think. But Kommander, to me, and I know he's one of the top young lucha guys right now, I've seen everything he does, and it's unimpressive. The only thing that's impressive is the tightrope walk, and I've seen that.
Well, that's impressive, but not in the context of a wrestling match. It would be impressive if somebody came out and painted the goddamn Mona Lisa, in the middle of a wrestling match, but it wouldn't make any sense.
So I got a kick out of the match for what it was, and like I said, I was watching it. I thought The problem was Kommander's very limited in what he could do, and he's really just a high spot guy, and we've seen what his high spots are. And Jericho's working with a guy that the style is just going to be such a ridiculous style clash. What's he going to do? I thought Jericho did as good as he could.
Well, it wasn't over. Because here came Don Callis to the ring with his microphone. I love his entrance music. It's the only sound that could be as annoying as his voice. Don wants Jericho still to join the family, the Don Callis family. And he played a VTR on the screen of a Tony Condello show from 1995. And there's Jericho and Callis doing a promo with Bad News Alan Coage. And both of them say that Bad News Alan, and of course this is complete bullshit. We didn't even hear what they were talking about. But both of them say that Bad News Alan made them promise to stick together. And they should honor their promise. And Don leaves Jericho with, you know what Bad News would want. Bad News would want his name not being mentioned on this program, probably, but nevertheless. So we're continuing to milk that, and there's going to be, later on, Hager's going to have a problem with Jericho. Hey, what's the matter? What are you doing? Is Jericho going to leave his stooges to join another group of stooges, is our mystery. And this is not exactly replicating the Bloodline saga.
No, it's not, and it's a little too hokey for me. Just want to follow up on something we just talked about. On the Drive-Thru, we talked about Dave Meltzer and his star ratings and the coverage certain people get. And I brought up Jericho, that none of the bad stuff ever gets called bad. Everything is good. Jim, do you know what star rating CM Punk versus Samoa Joe got from Dave for AEW Collision last week?
I do not know.
3 3/4 stars. Punk versus Joe.
Punk versus Joe, 3 3/4 stars.
FTR versus Jay White and Juice Robinson, 4 3/4 stars.
4 3/4, brilliant tag team match. He just couldn't give it 5 because they weren't his personal friends.
And again, he says, according to that interview, 4 3/4 is 5. It's practically 5. Celebrate it like it's 5. But there's a gauge. The Punk match, 3 3/4. The FTR match, 4 3/4. Jericho versus Kommander, 4 stars.
What?
How, in what world was that a better match in any way than Joe versus Punk? In what way did it mean anything more than Joe versus Punk? In any way, how could you even
when they're just doing shit and missing each other blatantly to where the people even react to it? They reacted to it when he fell on his ass. They were like, oh.
He gave that Adam Cole Jericho match that everyone agreed was one of the worst matches anyone had seen. 3 and 3.5 stars, whatever it was. Jericho never gets any of his bad shit called bad in the Observer. 4 stars.
Jericho and Kommander, 4 stars.
I told you I liked that match. I give it 3 stars. And they missed a bunch of stuff. I wouldn't rank it higher than Punk versus Joe. That's ridiculous.